A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks. Published in 1907. A Rebel Raid, number 32. Sometime in the fall of 1863, the federal authorities at Rolla learned that the rebels were organizing a strong force in Arkansas for the purpose of making a raid into Missouri. The rebels were under the command of General Burbridge. The author, being still the commander of the scouts, was ordered to take one man and go south for the purpose of learning, if possible, the movements of the rebels. The author left Rolla, came by way of Houston, where there was a post, thence to Hutton Valley, where there was living a man named Andy Smith, who was a Union man, but had made the rebels believe he was in favor of the South. The author approached Smith's house after dark, got something to eat and to feed his horses, and learned from Smith that the rebels were about prepared to make the raid into Missouri. On the next day, the author was informed by Smith that Burbridge was then moving with his full force in the direction of Missouri. The author at once started, intending to reach the nearest federal force, which was in Douglas County. In the meantime, General Burbridge, with his whole force, reached the Missouri line, leaving West Plains a little to the right, taking an old trace that ran on the divide between the waters of the North Fork of White River and of 11 Points River, this being afterwards known as the Old Burbridge Trail. The author, expecting they would march by way of West Plains and all through Hutton Valley, thought he would be able to keep ahead of them and make his report. But owing to their marching an entirely different route, the author crossed their trail. He found that a large force of men had just passed, and he, in company with a man named Long, examined the horse tracks, found that the shoes contained 3 nails in each side, and knew at once that it must be Burbridge's command. They had passed not more than 3 hours before this time. Making a forced march, the author and Long followed on the same trail, and soon came to a house, hallooed, and a lady coming out, we inquired how far the command was ahead. The lady informed us that they hadn't been gone more than 3 hours, and she exclaimed, "Hurrah for General Burbridge and his brave men! The Yankees and lop-eared Dutch are going to catch it now, and they intend to clean them out of the country." We then became satisfied as to whose command it was and their destination. We rode on about 200 yards from the house, turned to the left, and started with all possible speed, intending, if possible, to go around them and to get the word in ahead of them. On striking the road at the head of the North Fork of White River, we looked ahead of us about 100 yards and saw 25 men, about 50 yards from the road, all in citizens' dress, wearing white hat bands. The state had ordered all the state militia to wear white hat bands so that they might be designated from the rebels. The author remarked to Long, "I guess the men are militia, but we will ride slowly along the road and past them for fear they are rebels." They remained still on their horses until after we had passed them. Then they moved forward and came riding up and halted us and wanted to know who we were. The author told them his name was Williams, and Long told them his name was Tucker. They asked us if we had ever heard of the Alsups, and we told them we had. Then they wanted to know where we were going. We told them we were going into Arkansas near Yellville, that a general order had been made in the state of Missouri that all able-bodied men must come and enroll their names, and those who were not in the state service would have to be taxed. that we didn't want to fight nor pay a tax to support those who were fighting. They ordered us to dismount, surrounded us with cocked pistols, and ordered us to crawl out of our clothes and give up our arms. We commenced to strip. Long had on a very fine pair of boots for which he had just paid $5, and while the author didn't know at what moment they would be shot, he could not help but be tickled at the conduct of Long when they ordered him to take off his boots. He crossed his legs and commenced pulling with the remark, "My boots are tight." The pistols were cocked and presented right on him, not more than 6 feet away, and they told him to hurry up or they would shoot his brains out. While he was pulling at his boots, he appeared to be looking right down the muzzles of the revolvers. As soon as he had pulled off his boots and pitched them over, they remarked, "Hell, a right brand new pair of socks on. Pull them off quick and throw them over." A part of these men were dressed in the dirtiest, most ragged clothes the author had ever seen. Old wool hats with strings tied under their chins, old shoes with the toes worn out, and old socks that were mostly legs, but claiming all the time to be militia. They ordered us to get into their old clothes and shoes and place their old hats upon us. Our clothing and hats all being new, the author thought that was one of the hardest things they had ordered him to do, that he was just as apt to get out of the garments as to get into them. After we were dressed in their old clothing, one of them asked, "What did you say your name was?" Long replied, "Tucker." One that was standing a little back come running up with his pistol cocked and remarked that if he was a certain Tucker, naming the Tucker, "I am going to kill him right here." Another of the number said, "Hold on, this man is not the Tucker that you are thinking of." Then their leader said with an oath, "We belong to General Burbridge's command. He is just ahead. Do you want us to take you up to headquarters?" We told him we had heard of General Burbridge, and expected that he was a good man, so if they wanted to take us to his headquarters, all right. But we did not want to fall into the hands of the militia, as we wanted to get through to Yellville while General Burbridge was in the country. One of the men looked at the horses we were riding and remarked, "Let's take the horses. We have orders to take all horses and that are fit for the service." Another said the horses were rather small for the service, and as we would have a great deal of water to cross between there and Yellville, it would be a pity to make us wait it. Then their leader remarked, "We are Confederate soldiers out fighting for our country, and you men are too damned cowardly to fight. We have got to have clothing, and as we suppose you are good Southern men, when you get to Yellville, you can work for more clothes." They then ordered us to take the road and move on, and tell the Allsups that the country was full of rebels. We mounted our horses and rode away feeling happy on account of our escape. They remained in the road and watched us until we were out of their sight. The author looked over at Long's feet and saw his toes sticking out of his old shoes, could see his naked skin in several places through his raiment. He hardly looked natural, didn't look like the same man. We hadn't gone more than a mile until we struck a farm and a road leading between the farm on the one side and the bluff and river on the other, and looking in front saw about 15 men coming. The author said to Long, "What shall we do? Shall we attempt to run, or had we better pass them?" We concluded that it was impossible to get away by running, the only chance left being to try to pass through them without being recognized. We rode up to meet them, and they halted us and wanted to know where we were going. We told them we were going to Marion County, Arkansas, near Yellville. They asked us our names, and we again gave the names of Williams and Tucker. A man named Charlie Durham, who had resided at West Plains and had met me several times, rode up near us and asked me, "What did you say your name was?" I replied Williams. He asked, "Did you ever live down here about the state line?" I told him I never did, but I might have had relatives who lived on the state line. He said, "I am satisfied that I have seen you somewhere." One of the crowd asked us if we had met about 25 soldiers just ahead, and when we informed them that we had, they remarked, "Bully for the boys. We had better be moving on or we will be late." They moved on, and we continued down the road. As soon as we were out of sight, I said to Long, "We will not risk our chances in passing any more of them. There are too many men down here that are acquainted with us. If it hadn't been for my old clothes, Charlie Durham would have recognized me beyond a doubt." We then left the road and took to the woods, reaching the Federal forces about midnight. They had not heard a thing regarding the approach of the rebels. They hurriedly began to gather in all the forces, and at once set out to find, if possible, the destination of General Burbridge. It was learned that he had completely cut us off from reaching either Houston or Rolla. On the next day, the Federal forces met General Burbridge at Hartsville, Wright County, Missouri, and there fought a battle with him. The commander of the post at Houston, who was in command of the Federals, was killed on the first fire from the artillery of General Burbridge. Colonel McDonald, during the engagement, was shot dead at the head of the town spring. Burbridge retreated on the same route that he had come up on. His command was separated into several divisions to get food. Long and I had been furnished clothes and arms. Captain Alsop, being in command, moved near the road that leads down Fox Creek, saw a rebel scout moving down Fox Creek, composed of a part of the same men we had met the day before. Captain Alsop said he thought that by striking the road and taking the rebels by surprise we could rout them. On marching about a mile, we came in sight of them, dismounted for dinner at the house of a man named Ferris. I proposed to Captain Alsop that we charge them. He thought it might be too dangerous, that they would have the benefit of the house and might outnumber us, and we would be compelled to retreat and might be cut off from our horses. He ordered us to dismount, formed a line, left men to hold the horses, and on moving about 10 steps, the rebel picket, who was placed just outside of the line, discovered us. They opened fire from each side of the house and along a picket fence which enclosed the house. We returned the fire. The first volley that was fired, a ball passed near my ear and wounded the horse that I was riding. The firing continued for some time. We had them cut off from their horses unless they came outside and faced a continual firing. One man attempted to leave the house and reach his horse, but about 10 feet from the door he received a wound in the face and fell to the ground. In a moment he arose to his feet, and he and several others again retreated into the house. The firing continued for 15 or 20 minutes, when the rebels retreated on foot by taking advantage of the house, except one man who reached his horse, cut the halter, sprang into the saddle, turned his horse down the lane, leaning close to the horn of the saddle, put spurs, and made his escape. In the meantime, the wounded man attempted to make his escape by taking advantage of the house and retreating. Captain Alsop, when he saw the rebels were retreating, ordered a charge. The wounded man was again wounded and fell to the ground, helpless. All the other rebels reached the woods and made their escape. Ferris, the man who owned the house where the rebels were stopping, received a serious wound in the breast. They left 16 horses with their rigs, saddle riders filled with new clothing in our possession. General Burbridge retreated from the state, and DeArthur reported to his command at Rolla.